I thought, I wanted to just paint a couple of little gnomes for you. I just sketched them out just this morning. Aren't they cute? So anyway, let's just put a little color on them. They're super easy. That's something you could totally do it with if you have grandkids or anything like that. So I'm gonna start with the hat, put a little water in, and obviously the red, put a little bit more red on. And I'm just using that same red, which is a quinacridone red. I have actually, when I'm gonna do my next palette, fill up my next palette, I am going to switch from the quinacridone red, which is the red I have here, and I have used that as my primary red forever because it's the best I've found so far. But I found out actually that Daniel Smith, they have a red that's called quinacridone coral, and it's just a little bit more true red, because the only kind of complaint I've had on this one is that I'm going to put a little bit of a darker underneath here just to kind of give it a little shadow, and maybe in here a couple of places just to try and give it a little pizzazz. Yeah, the quinacridone red here is a little on the pink side. The coral red is more like a true red, so I'm going to switch. It's the same pigment number on everything, so I'm just putting a little bit of red here, like a sleeve for his little hands, and then we can use some of the blackish color here for his little feet, shoes, boots, whatever he's wearing. And just for fun, we could give him some green gloves. Use some of the quinacridone gold and put a little bit of the Antwerp in. Just a little bit of, and I don't mind if they run together a little bit. There, and then there's a little bit here, just like that. And then we need to get his nose. So we're gonna do a skin color. So we're gonna use burnt sienna, and then we're gonna put a little bit, not too much, a little bit of the cobalt blue in to just kind of tone it down a little bit, maybe a little bit more. And there's a little bit of the yellow in, and then lots of water. And then, his little nose. It's gonna give his little nose. Put mainly underneath, and then I'm gonna rinse out my brush, swing around before it dries. Oops, see, I had a droplet. That's what happens when you have droplets, like right on the shaft there. See, it fell right into his hat. It's probably gonna create a bloom, but it's okay. We're not gonna worry about it. There's his little nose. This here is actually a block of arches. Of arches, rough paper. This happens to be rough, and this one is 5.9, so 6 by 12, almost 5.9 times 11.8, because it's 15 by 30 centimeters, because it's a European size, but it's arches. I have been experimenting with some different formats. I like these long and skinny ones, so I bought this one, and then I bought this is smaller. This one is the cold pressed, and this is 3.9 times 9.8, so that's kind of 4 by 10. So it's odd sizes, which I always advise against for framing purposes, but you know how it is. I have a tendency not to follow my own advice sometimes. So I gave him a little bit of red on the nose right there, because he has a red nose, let's face it. So now I just put a little bit of dark on my brush tip here, just to give him a little bit of eyes. And then we just need something, maybe we can use some of this cobalt that is more grayed down with some of that burnt sienna that I deposited there. Put a little bit more in, kind of like that, and very watery. And then we just want to give him a little bit, that beard, just give it a little bit of shadow here and there, just and you can leave out the arms if you don't want to, but there. And I could maybe give him a little bit of a reddish cheek here. There. And see that droplet, that actually worked out just fine. It gives kind of a little bit of a highlight on the front. Again, with these things, loose is fine. A little bit darker there. There you have it. So there's a little gnome. So I hope you had fun with that first gnome, and I'm going to just speed it up, and then I'm going to paint in here the second gnome, and it's the same method exactly. And I'm going to show you also how to put a little background around these two fellas. So I'm going to put some Christmas music on, just paint along and enjoy. And I'm going to check in with you when we get to the background to just explain a few little techniques there. Enjoy! So once I'm finished with that second little gnome, I am putting some clean water, and I'm trying to be careful going around the two gnomes. And I can go over the little pom-poms because I put masking fluid on there because I want them white against a dark background. So my plan is to paint in some blue for the sky, and then I'm going to run in some dark greens for some impressions of some evergreens, and I'm going to leave the foreground snow, and I'm going to put a little bit of snow shadow on. You'll see that in the demo, and I will get back to you once we get to painting in the background. And here you can see I'm starting with the sky, and I want everything to be wet into wet so I get soft edges because it's a background. I don't want it to be too detailed. So you can see I have mixed myself a dark green using some Antwerp blue, some indigo, and some burnt sienna, and a little bit of quinacridone gold. And I'm using my rigger brush to paint in the evergreens that are behind the two gnomes. And as the paint is drying, you can see how the shapes are holding more, and I can put those little edges and tops of the evergreens, and the rest is just abstracted. So that's an easy way to paint a background for these two little gnomes. So you can see here I'm working on the foreground after I finished the background, and first I put a little cast shadow under the little gnomes. For the shadows in the snow in the foreground, including the cast shadows, I'm using a mixture of some cobalt blue with a little bit of quinacridone red, and I'm graying it down with a tiny bit of the burnt sienna mix that I used for the nose and the shadows. And it just gives a little bit more texture to the foreground, and I am going to sprinkle in a little bit of salt, just like I did in the background, only here I'm getting hopefully a little bit more reaction. The background was too dry when I applied it, so I didn't really get much texture out of it, but that's fine. And then I'm taking my credit card and using the pointy part of it. You know, I cut them in half and then there's a pointy part. I use that to just scrape in some little indications of some weeds and twigs sticking up through the snow, just to break it up a little bit. And then I go in and loosen some edges so I don't have too many hard edges there in the foreground, and just strengthening some of the cast shadow under the gnomes as we go. And this last part is just a little fine tuning for little areas that I feel needs a little bit more tweaking.